A cowboy could sleep in the rain on dirt beside a herd of nervous cattle because his house rolled up behind the chuckwagon. That is not a poetic line, it is a physical fact, and it opens a case that rarely investigated. Ask someone what a cowboy's bedroll was. They will tell you it was a blanket and a tarp, something to rough it with, something simple. They are wrong. The bedroll was not bedding, it was a portable house. A waterproof shell, a storage system, and the only private space a man owned between towns. And the evidence for that claim is sitting in a museum right now, rolled up and silent, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. One specimen in the Oklahoma Historical Society is a standard trail drive bedroll, cataloged and measured. It looks like nothing. Canvas on the outside, wool inside. But if you treat it like a crime scene, the evidence starts to layer up. Canvas outer shell. This was not raw cotton. It was treated. Linseed oil? Most likely. Water resistant, stiff with it, smelling of oil and dust. Inside, 2 wool blankets. Wool insulates even when wet. That is not accidental. That is design. And then, tucked into the roll, the personal effects. Spare clothes, tobacco, letters, sometimes a small tool, a feather pillow if the man was lucky. That is not a sleeping bag. That is a dresser drawer, a mattress, and a rain jacket rolled into one. The bedroll solved multiple problems at once: warmth, wet weather, storage, and it did it all in a bundle a man could throw off a wagon and unroll in under a minute. But the layers explain only part of the survival. There was something else soaked into the canvas, something the museum notes do not emphasize, but every first-person account confirms. The bedroll smelled like beef. It absorbed cooking smoke from the chuck wagon, cattle odors from the air, sweat from the man, dust from 100 miles of trail. It carried the odor of the herd, the fire, and the work. To a modern nose, that would be foul. To a cowboy, it was the scent of home, the only constant in a landscape that had no walls, no address, and no other familiar thing. That smell was not a defect. It was a sensory anchor. It told the brain, you are here. This is your place. And that mattered more than anyone who hasn't slept in dirt for 3 months can understand. The next piece of evidence is not an object. It is a statement from the trail. Cowboy said that losing your bedroll was worse than losing dinner. That is not an exaggeration. It is a forensic detail about the stakes. Dinner was shared. The cook made it. The wagon carried it. If a meal was missed, there would be another. But the bedroll contained every personal item a cowboy owned. Letters from back east, a pocket knife, a pouch of tobacco, the only spare shirt, no replacement for hundreds of miles. Andy Adams in The Log of a Cowboy, 1903, describes men who lost their bedrolls at river crossings. They were left with nothing, nothing to sleep in, nothing to wear, nothing that was theirs. That was the deeper function. The bedroll was private territory. On a cattle drive, everything else was communal. The fire, the food, the watch rotation, the herd. The bedroll was the one place a man could be alone. Losing it meant losing the only boundary he had. A man could go without a meal. He couldn't go without a meal. He couldn't go without a home. And yet, if you compare it to modern survival gear, the bedroll seems almost primitive. A modern sleeping bag is lighter, warmer, more waterproof. But place specimen 1972.034.001 beside a modern 3-season bag. The modern bag excels in thermal efficiency. It has no pocket for letters, no storage for tobacco. No roll is a dresser drawer. It is a single function object. The bedroll was 4 functions in one. We have optimized for comfort. We forgot about home. The bedroll did both. And it did it without zippers, without ultralight nylon, without a single patent. The frontier didn't need complex materials. It needed integrated systems. And the bedroll was integrated at a level most modern minimalists would envy. But the physical object was only half the system. The other half was what happened every night when the cattle settled and the chuck wagon stopped. A cowboy didn't just throw down his bedroll and collapse. He unrolled it in a designated spot, near the wagon but at a slight distance from the others. He arranged his belongings inside. He built a small territory in the dark. That routine was not casual. It was a psychological necessity. E.C. Abbott, in We Pointed Them North, 1939, tells of a cowboy who lost his bedroll crossing the Pecos River. He spent the night shivering on the bank, but the cold was not the worst part. He had lost his place. The ritual was broken. The ground was just ground. The house was not the canvas. It was the act of rolling it out each night and knowing where you belonged. The bedroll turned an undifferentiated prairie into a bedroom. Without it, the cowboy was not just exposed. He was adrift. That is why the bedroll is a cold case worth reopening. It was not a simple object. It was a survival technology that solved for shelter, storage, and psychological stability in one bundle. It was a portable house, and the record confirms it. Specimen 1972.0 34.001 sits in a drawer now. Its oiled canvas is brittle. Its wool is thin. It carried a man's whole life once. Now it carries a lesson. The bedroll was a triumph of frontier engineering, but it was also fragile. One river crossing gone wrong. One loose strap on the wagon, and the house was gone. Everything gone. The letters, the tobacco, the spare shirt, the smell of beef smoke, the tiny territory in the dark, a house you could lose in one river crossing. And then you had nothing. That is the final verdict. The bedroll was not a blanket. It was the one thing a cowboy couldn't survive without. And the evidence has been under museum glass for decades, waiting for someone to unroll it again.